Hey everyone, welcome to section 5. We are going to prove lines parallel. Remember in section 2, we knew that our lines were parallel. So then we could say that angles were congruent or were supplementary. Now we are going to say if angles are congruent, then angles are congruent or supplementary, then we know that lines are parallel. So we're just going to go in reverse, noting the converse word that you see if you remember back in the logic chapter. So our first converse is the converse of corresponding angles postulate. So if I have a transversal and I know that corresponding angles are congruent, so if I say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, then I can know that A is parallel to B. And that would actually happen for any of those pairs of corresponding angles. So it doesn't just have to be one set or one specific placement. It can be any of those corresponding angles. All right, our second postulate says if I have a point and a line, so the point is not on the line, there is exactly one line through the point that will be parallel to the original line. And that's just saying there can only be one line that has that slope that is going to be parallel. So any other line would have a little bit of a different slope, which again we talked about in the last couple sections. A few more postulates and theorems that we need to make sure we remember. Alternate exterior angles converse. Alternate exterior angles converse. Remember, if any of those alternate exterior angles are congruent, so if I know that 1 is congruent to 3, I know that P is parallel to Q. Consecutive interiors, remember, are supplementary. So if I know that angle 4 plus angle 5 equals 180 degrees, then I can say that I have parallel lines. Alternate interior angles. Alternate interiors, again, are congruent. So if I know that 8 is congruent to 6, then I know that P is parallel to Q. So my final answer would be the then part. My lines are parallel. And then the last one, perpendicular, transversal, converse. So if I know that two lines are perpendicular to the same line, then I know that the two lines are going to be parallel. So again, just as a refresher, or 3-2, we have parallel. So if we have parallel lines, then the angles are congruent or supplementary, depending on the pair. Now, our angles are congruent or supplementary. We're going to prove lines parallel. And we're going to use this fancy word converse in our answers. Angle pairs still stay in the same place, so none of that is new. Let's look at our first example. If I know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, is it possible to prove any lines parallel? So if I'm looking at 1 and 3, I'm looking at line A and B, and I know that 1 and 3 are corresponding angles. When it comes to lines A and B. So since I know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, I'm looking at my converse, so I can tell that A is parallel to B by the converse of corresponding angles. All right, let's try another one. Same picture. I know that angle 1 is 103 degrees. And then I'm told that angle 4 is 100 degrees. Is it possible to prove any line? So I'm looking at line A, because angle 1 is made up of line A, and this transversal line, or angle 4, is made up of line C and this transversal right here. So I can see that 1 and 4 are alternate. Interior angles when I'm looking at lines A and C. Since alternate interior angles must be congruent, I know that 103 is not equal to 100. So I know that angle 1 is not congruent to angle 4. So I know that A is not parallel to C because of the alternate interior angles. And since I'm trying to prove lines parallel, I'm going to use the converse. Alright, if you will stop this video and try your next 2 checkpoints, and then you can start the video up again and check your answers. Here are your 2 answers. Alright, let's look at our next example. We have that ZYN. We need to find ZYN so that PQ is parallel to MN. Alright, so I know with the information I'm given, I know that this angle, WXP, and this angle, ZYN, are alternate exterior angles. And I know that if I want to make lines parallel, I know alternate exterior angles must be congruent. So if they are congruent, I'm going to set them equal to each other. When I do that, I can then substitute. So 7x plus 35 equals 11x minus 25. Again, substitution. I am then going to subtract 7x from both sides. So I would get 35 equals 4x minus 25 using the subtraction. I am then going to add 25 to both sides, so I would get 60 equals 4x. So I'm going to use the addition POE. Then I'm going to divide, so I would get 15 equals x. And then last, because I'm just trying to keep my properties fresh, I'm going to use a symmetric property to switch that around. Alright, so if x equals 15, now we need to know the value or the measure of these angles. So I'm looking at ZYN, and I know that x is 15. So I'm going to say 7 times 15 plus 35 gives me 140 degrees for the measure of angle ZYN. And so my lines are parallel. I need these two to be congruent. So I would also know that the measure of angle WXP is equal to 140 degrees. All right, because they would both be congruent, we were able to find or say that the lines were parallel using alternate exterior angles converse. Remember, for proving lines parallel, we're going to use the converse. Alrighty, and will you stop this video and try your next checkpoint, please? Here is your answers. And last, a couple proofs just proving lines parallel. So I know that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. That is given. Well, if angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent, they are alternate exterior angles. So I know that if alternate exterior angles are congruent, I know that L is parallel to M by the converse of that. All right, that one was kind of straightforward. Let's look at this one though. So I have that WX is parallel already to XZ. So since I have parallel lines, now I can tell things are congruent or supplementary. So I know that those two things are parallel. I'm going to mark my givens. I also know that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. All right, so I have that information. I am trying to get to YW is parallel to XZ. So that's what I'm trying to get to. All right, so I know that since they're congruent, they are also equal. So I'm going to say definition of congruent angles. All right, so because I have parallel lines, what else can I find? So looking at my purple, I know that angle 2 and angle 4 are consecutive interior angles. Excuse my pen. So they are they're consecutive interior angles, so we can then, maybe, if my computer wants to work, sorry about that. I hope my computer wants to work here for just a little bit longer so we can get through this video. We're going to try this one more time. So because I have parallel lines, I know that 2 and 4 are consecutive interior angles. And because they're parallel, I know that angle 2 and angle 4 are supplementary because of the consecutive interior angles theorem. And because they're supplementary, I also know that they add up to be 180 degrees by the definition of supplementary angles. We talked about that last chapter. And if you notice, from 4 to 5, I have only switched those two around, so I know that that is substitution. Maybe, if I can get to the right page. All right, and since I know that they equal 180 degrees, I also know that they are now supplementary. And because 3 and 4 are supplementary, so 3 lands on that line, 4 lands on that line, and that would be my transversal line now, I can say that they are parallel because of the consecutive interior angles, and then we're proving parallel, so I'm going to use the word converse. Alright, that's all I got for section 5. Sorry about the video. See you back here next time.